Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from the chrisvossshow.com, the chrisvossshow.com. Hey, coming here with another great podcast. We certainly appreciate you guys as an audience tuning in. I just got our latest podcast report, and the explosion of new downloads is happening. We're hitting high new levels of downloads. So we certainly appreciate you guys. I certainly appreciate you guys sharing the show. If you're not sharing the show, please tell your friends, neighbors, relatives, dogs, cats, pool boys, mistresses. Get them all in on the action, downloading the Chris Voss Show. Go to Google Play for that, iTunes, of course, youtube.com/Chris Voss. Hit that bell notification button, and as always on your mobile device, and go to patreon.com/Chris Voss. We have the greatest audience in the world, of course, and we have the greatest guests as well. And returning for a second time is Mary Shores. Mary spends her career as an author, speaker, entrepreneur, generating positive, pragmatic solutions for people who are freaking out. Mary blends personal experience with her extensive knowledge of neuroscience and human behavior to guide businesses and individuals to defend the freak out and create their ideal life. Welcome to the show again, Mary.
Hey, Chris. How's it going today?
Cool, cool, cool. We're glad to have you back. I know I really had a great time with you on one of the prior shows and said you were so awesome. Let's have you back again. And I was probably having one of those experiences, if I recall, where, you know, you had so much great information, we couldn't compact it all into an episode. So we wanted you back again.
I know. I'm so excited. I don't know if you remember this, but I sent you a screenshot the last time of my book being at number 3. And then you opened the show and you said, let's make it number 1. Well, here's what you don't know. So right after the show and after you and I disconnected, of course, I checked Amazon, and to my utter delight, the book was indeed number 1.
Wow. I like to take credit for it, but I'm sure it's because you're just incredibly awesome.
Well, I think that you made a big call to action for your listeners.
We gave a little bit of nudge, a little bit of push to get there, but mostly it was your awesomeness.
I think it was all the stars aligned that day. But anyway, I'm just so deeply grateful to you and the show and to the listeners of the show, because that was, you know, that's a moment in life, honestly, I'll never forget. So when it happened, I didn't know what to do. So, you know, like I'm staring at the Amazon screen, and it's in categories, you know, so it's not like you're number 1 in the whole world, like, you know, whoever is the producer of the Titanic, but, it's more like you're number 1 in a category. And the category for me was self-esteem. So I didn't know what to do. So I called up Hay House, which is my publisher. But here's the thing. It's not like their automated message has a spot for like push 4 if your book hits number 1. So I just hit 0, right? And I got customer service. And then here's the funniest thing. So this guy answers the phone, this random guy in customer service at Hay House answers the phone. And I just start screaming, I'm number 1, I'm number 1. And he's like, he must think I'm nuts, right? Like, who is this crazy lady? Well, anyway, his name happens to be Guy Murray, customer service at Hay House. Anyway, he was so awesome to me. And I actually just had the pleasure of meeting him last week because I got invited to go to Hay House and give a speech, and it was all arranged by him. So it's like, you know, sometimes you make those random connections with people and it turns into this like really great relationship that you never even knew you were going to have. So that's a day in my life from the last time I was on the Chris Voss Show. I don't know if you can top that today, Chris.
Wow. Okay. We'll try.
Okay.
It's a little hard to get you higher than number 1, but I know number 1's really important on Amazon, because once you can get your book to hit number 1, you really, you know, they put you in search better and present you better, and things can just really cook from that point on.
It was such a fun moment. You know, I didn't take myself too seriously. And of course it stayed number 1 for about 20 hours, but like I'll have that memory for the rest of my life. And I'm just
so now,
did
grateful. When you say you have a better relationship with this gentleman named Guy, is there like a relationship here? Am I funding a marriage, creating?
No, you know, he lives in sunny San Diego, and I live in cows and cornfields of Champaign, Illinois.
Yeah. Well, if anything happens, let me know. I mean, it would be fun to be able to say the Chris Voss Show puts people together, gets them married.
I will definitely let you know.
We're a podcast and a matchmaking service. That's what we do here. but
I think I'm going on a show like that next week.
Chris Voss Show does, it brings people to love each other and care about each other, even if it's only platonic.
That's right.
Build a better place. So, Mary, I didn't get a chance to ask you for your plugs. Can you give us your plugs so people can look up your books on Amazon and all that good stuff?
Yeah, a big ask for me is if you listen to me today and what I say resonates with you, please just go to Amazon, check out Conscious Communications by Mary Shores and read the description. See if it's something you'd like to know more about. If you want to find me online, it's Mary Shores, SHORES.com. I'm easy to find on all social media under that same name.
Coolio. So you have one book or more than one book? I think you were working on another book, or you just have the one book?
I've got one book out now. I'm working on a second book, and I've got more in my head. We'll see what happens.
All that good stuff. And you've been everywhere. Soup or Chicken Soup for the Soul. I'm dyslexic, I guess. Hay House, HuffPost, and Conscious Communication has been just a great book. So tell us about the book, what it's about for people who missed the prior podcast, so we can recap that.
Sure. So the book is all about, it's a personal development book, but it's taking it another level, because I think that what's really unique and special about this particular book is it actually goes into the nitty-gritty details of how you do things. So it's not just saying like, get into alignment or do this or think positive. It's way beyond that. And it's telling you extreme pragmatic steps of how to do things that will actually change the subconscious programming. So we hear that a lot, like buzzwords, like change your neural networks, or change your mind, change your life. And so it is about that, but it's going to give you the actual steps on how to do that. So much so that I've had people telling me that while they were doing one of the exercises in my book, that their actual head started itching. And they looked it up, and it said that when your head is itching, it could be because you're actually growing new connections in your brain. So if you buy my book, it may or may not make your head itch, but it will definitely make your brain sweat.
That, or you have lice. That might be something you want to look at. So, but no, just being funny, of course. So you go through all that in the book. And I think we talked about your life journey, your career journey, and your experience in the prior podcast as well. If you want to recap that for we have a lot of new listeners from what we've been growing pretty rampantly.
Sure. And luckily I listened to the show this morning while I was at the dentist. So, I didn't want to have a repeat of the same show. So I definitely know some more things that I can share if anyone heard me the first time. But like, I'm this person that totally came from nothing. And when I say nothing, I mean, I was out on my own at 16 years old. I had no resources, no guidance, really no anything, but I still managed to graduate high school, go to community college for a while. And something I didn't share on the last episode is that I actually had a daughter when I was very young. So I was a teen mom, yay, at 19. And my daughter was born with severe and profound brain damage. And what I mean by that is that she was blind, she was deaf, she was void of human instincts, which means she couldn't suck a bottle, and she had to have a tube surgically implanted into her tummy in order to pass nutrients through to her. So she also was on life support for the first several weeks of her life. And when she overcame at least the need for basic life support, she was in and out of the children's hospitals for the time that she lived. And as a 19-year-old and 20-year-old, you think most 19 and 20-year-olds are like out partying and enjoying college life. Well, I was sleeping on the emergency room floor, and I was seeing things that you can just never unsee in life. And Haley was her name. She did pass away in 1993. And I think that, thank you so much. And, it's different because she was not a healthy infant. Yeah. So, I think there's a difference between losing a child. I just want to acknowledge that for any other parents who've lost a child. Yes, I did lose a child, but it was really the biggest pain was watching her suffering, because you you can't give an 8-pound baby enough morphine after a surgery to kill the pain without killing their body. So,
Yeah.
Those physical life effects were much more difficult to be a part of than her actual like passing.
Yeah.
So where people get really fascinated with my story is how was I able to overcome certain things in my past and go on to becoming the youngest person to open a collection agency in the entire world when I was 24 years old. So it's like, what is it about that level of resiliency, courage, persistence, and resiliency that allowed me to pick myself up and start this business, and not only start a business at 24, but keep it going for 20 years. I mean, Chris, you're a businessman, you know what it's like and how many more businesses fail than they do survive in the roller coaster economics that we've had for my entire adult life. So that's the basic foundation of where I came from.
And it's a very tough foundation to come from, and very character building. I went through something very similar to what you went through, although I think mothers are more connected to their children, especially from, them being inside them for 9 months. They have an intimacy with their children that I don't think men quite get, and I certainly didn't as a 10-year-old. But when my parents' fourth child had a very similar problem to what you had, they weren't really sure what happened, whether she was born with cerebral palsy or acquired it. I know that when she came down the track from leaving the womb, they say that she probably defecated and ingested it, which cut off her oxygen supply. And so she came out black and blue. And they immediately had whisked her off to, my sister whisked her off to revive her and stabilize her. And so it wasn't the normal episode my mom was used to with her prior 3 kids where, they're like, here's your baby. And so they knew that something was instantly wrong at that point. And because of the lack of oxygen being cut off, she lost her eyesight. She could still see bright lights. Like if she would look at lights directly, and if you waved your hand at her, she could see the movement of the lights, but she was pretty much blind when it came down to it. And we went through the similar experience that I'm sure you did, sleeping on the floors, looking at, I used to wander at 10 years old, the babies in the intensive care tents, just looking like little pin cushions with needles and wires and tubes coming out of them. And I remember what that was like, going through it, where it was constant touch and go. Do we put her down? Do we give up? What do we do? And it looked like a horror show to me. I would sleep with my parents in a camper outside of the University of Utah and then Primary Children's Hospital. And I saw my parents sleep on the floor. I did some of that with them. And sometimes at night, I'd just go wander through the IR, and see what that was like. And it's definitely life-changing. I witnessed several times parents meeting with the doctor, where the doctor just said, we've got to pull the plug, and the parents had to make the decision to end their life. And in fact, eventually Annie came home with us to die at home. My mom made the decision after 3 months of being in intensive care, and she said, look, if she's going to die, I'd just like her to pass away at home. And so we brought her home to die, if you will. So I have a lot of empathy for what you went through. It sounds like a very similar experience to what we did. And it's a very horrible experience when it comes down to it. And it's a character builder, if anything.
And, Chris, thank you so much for sharing your experience. I had no idea that you had that in your history. And just to think that I was only 9 years older than you were, only it was my child. So that kind of puts you in
Very personal.
I didn't, at 19, I couldn't even comprehend things like put someone down, you know what I mean? Or like pull the plug. And we were in a Catholic hospital system, so it wasn't actually an option to me. But later on, as I started to think about it, it was something that was on the forefront of my mind, especially when Terry Schiavo was like the national news story. I'm sure you remember that big story, the woman that was on life support, and she
Oh
had been for
yeah.
like many, many years, and the parents wanted to keep her alive. The husband wanted to let her go so that he could move on. And it just became this big legal battle and of what to
Political
do. And
battle too. I mean, they used her as a political prop for a long time, sadly.
right, right, right. So, yeah, I mean, I think that that's just at the precipice of the young, very young foundation. I mean, I wasn't homeless, so I can't, I'm not claiming that I was a homeless person, but I wasn't living with my parents. I was kind of, staying with friends, that kind of a thing. I had a place to sleep as a young person, but didn't have that foundation of stability.
Mhm.
And things just went
These
from
things
bad to
really shape
worse.
us. They really make a difference. I think I have a higher value of life in spending so much time seeing the struggle of birth and the struggle of life, and you realize too how much you really got the lottery ticket in being able to born. Hopefully most of us were born normal, and how tragic life could be and unfair sometimes when it comes down to it, or seemingly unfair, even though it's a natural state of the universe, I suppose.
It's
But
so true.
definitely a tragedy, and definitely shaping in your life and your memories, and valuing other human beings when it comes down to it.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. It makes you I think it made me appreciate children in a different way as well. And I definitely know that in my complete obsession with brain science, that is the starting place of it, was just because, this was before the internet. This was the early, 92, 93. So when I wanted to learn something about the way that her brain worked or what could potentially heal her, I went to the library, and that was my first introduction to wanting to understand neuroscience and how our brains just like affect and control everything in our body. But more importantly, like over the next 2 decades, that really became such a deep learning of how everything affects our reality, how it affects our perception, how our words interact with ourselves and other people. How I always wanted to run my company in a way that is like much more humanitarian plus versus humanitarian minus. And I think it's one of the things that propelled me into leadership roles throughout my life. I call myself the accidental mentor.
The accidental mentor. I think we all are when it comes down to it. We go through life, and hopefully we survive the struggles that we had, and we learn something, and we share each other, so that the biggest problem with life is it doesn't come with a owner's manual.
Right.
So I always think of that. What was that TV show, The America's Greatest Hero? They're like, well, he got the superpowers without the manual, so he doesn't know what superpowers he has. And maybe that's a journey that we all are on. It's just to find our superpower when we're in this time space.
I think that's so true. It leads me to talk about something. I've been talking about this a lot, which is the big P word, and we'll call that purpose. Like what, or superpowers is a great way, another way to say purpose, I think, because right now it's become such a buzzword. Like everyone's searching for purpose and what are they supposed to be doing in life? Like purpose has become this elusive thing that's hiding behind a curtain, and you have to go through some certain upheaval in life to be able to discover what your purpose is. And I can tell you, like for me, it was just simply a moment of understanding like what are my natural skills, gifts, talents, and abilities, and how can I apply those particular skill sets to whatever I'm doing in life. So like, for example, I own a collection agency, and excuse me, I bumped my knee. That probably sounded terrible in the microphone. It was not an earthquake. We are not having an earthquake. Okay. So I own this collection agency, but a long time ago, I really wanted to take a different path in life. And all of a sudden, spirituality and personal development became hugely important in my life. And I was really terrified at how this was going to affect my business and my ability to make money, because how was I going to follow this path of, say, being a force for good, being humanitarian plus, while I was in this industry that's looked upon as a very negative stigma? And what I come to realize after about a year of having this sort of crisis of meaning, that it's really when you take your own innate gifts, and we all have them. I mean, some people are great connectors. Some people are great nurturers. Some people are great speakers or teachers or healers or whatever it is that is our innate abilities. And we bring that out into the world and apply it to whatever is our job. You know, I'm not somebody that thinks everyone has to turn into an entrepreneur and quit their jobs tomorrow. But like, when you can start to understand what your gifts are and apply them to your world, you can really see changes starting to happen. And for me, that happened relatively quickly.
Most definitely. Yeah, it's interesting. We help each other. Hopefully, I know a lot of stuff that I've shared going through my catharsis of being, and oversharing it online, if you will, has actually helped inspired and maybe save some other people. I know that 2 times in our journey of being on social media, my automated tweets of just positive suggestions, positive quotes, if you will, online. I had 2 people write me over the years and say they were contemplating suicide that day. And that random automated tweet that I tweeted without really thinking about it much helped save someone's life, according to them.
Wow.
And so, we have an impact on each other, whether we realize it or not. And of course, sharing and helping each other. It is really sad that our life doesn't come, we don't have a handbook, and it doesn't seem like we're educated very well in school to deal with some of the life challenges that we go through. They almost have to be this shocking birthment of catharsism that we have to go through, where we have to be what's the right word, redressed in our ego and taken down a notch or two and taught some lessons, and then hopefully learn from them and maybe inspire or share others, or in some small way in our own little backyard, make the world a better place before we leave it. So hopefully some of those things happen as a result of that.
I know I've learned quite a few things along the way, including one I really wanted to share with you today.
Okay.
So I'm so excited about this, Chris. I've been like, I couldn't wait to talk to you today so I could share this with you. We're still sort of at the beginning of the year, so I think this fits. One of the things that I've been thinking about recently, and in like my entrepreneurial head of mine, is how stretched in so many directions I can tend to go. And it's like, it's really difficult, I think, especially for young entrepreneurs. If you're hearing this and you're thinking about like starting your business, or you're in a leadership role, you may understand that feeling of when you get pulled in so many directions. Or if you're an idea person, you just have ideas come to you so fast that sometimes you don't know what to do with them. So I've been working on this concept since the beginning of the year that I'm calling the Core 4. So I just absolutely fell in love with this. I discovered it after a week-long meditation retreat. And it really goes like this. It's like you take your business and you think, what are the four main areas of focus for this given time period? It doesn't have to be a year. It doesn't have to be like, there's not a deadline to it, because once one of the focuses change, you can just insert another one. What was happening in my life is, especially since the book came out, life has been a ginormous transition period. So it's like all of a sudden I've gotten offered television shows, podcasts. I'm getting all of these offers and ideas and things to do with this, say, newfound platform that I have, but it was so many things that it couldn't be managed. So we boiled it down to 4 areas of focus. And I also did this in my personal life. And it just made like decision making so much easier, because what it meant was all of the energy needed to be spent on these 4 core items. So it's different than a goal, because a focus is going to, we always hear this, what you focus on grows, but how do you train your focus to be on certain things? And so for me, I was like all over the place. And when I could really dial it into these 4 things, it was just like everything became less overwhelming.
Yeah, it's definitely, we live in an overwhelming world when it comes down to it, where we have so many distractions, so many things in our face, so many demands for our time, money, and of course, we seem to have less and less of both time and money. So there's the scarcity effect and desperation for many of us in the world. I think the statistics, most people are living paycheck to paycheck. So there's that. And so you've come up with some different ways to address that, deal with that, and put a spin on that to make things better.
Yeah. And so, like, for example, in my personal life, I created a core for my personal life. And one of those is to become like the most, get back into this like level of optimal health. So I was kind of like one of these health fanatical persons before I started writing the book. And if I'm being really honest, I would say that some of my habits that I developed during that like 2.5-year process of writing and publishing the book, that I traded some healthy habits for some not so healthy habits. So this looks like, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, too exhausted to create a healthy meal. So I'm going to order Chinese takeout. Well, you do that once, you do it 5 times, and next thing you know, you're doing it twice a week. And this is just totally out of alignment with like who I am as a person. Well, like I said, after 2.5 years, it started to like weight started to creep up on me. I started to notice like, not like health problems, but concerns, things that were concerning me about like my energy level. Things just weren't right. So when I'm thinking about this core 4, one of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to address my eating first. So before I like jump back into, I was a kickboxer for 8 years. So before I wanted to just like jump back into kickboxing, and I don't mean kickboxing like with another person, because if anybody hit me, I would like drop and roll and probably cry and be like, why are you so mean to me?
I would too.
So that is not an invitation to spar, but it's more like, I could be in West Side Story. Let's just put it that way.
Okay.
Like I could totally act out a scene in West Side Story, so long as there's music playing and it's hip hop. All right. Hip hop. Of course, I can't be on a cruise ship though, because I get motion sickness. Anyway, so like when the book came out, my assistant was like, there's this guy and he's starting this business. It's a personal chef service and it's not that much money. I really think you should do it. And I didn't do it because it felt too indulgent to me. It felt like, I don't know, it felt like I was giving up as a domestic. You know what I'm saying? Like I should be able to cook meals for my family, or I'm a failure at being a mother and a domestic. Mm-hmm. But now that I've like instated the core 4 and this opportunity came back around to hire somebody, I actually didn't think about it at all, because it was in alignment with core 4, because every decision is ran through these 4 elements of my life. Oh. And so my core 4 right now is my business, my brand, my children, and my health. So notice, Chris, I didn't say relationship, so like, sorry guys, but it's like,
sorry guys,
it's not, maybe next year that'll be in my core 4, but because why? Because I really want to focus on these areas of my life. And ever since I started doing that, everything has just gotten so much better. So when this opportunity came around and I wanted to try this Whole30 diet plan, I guess it's not a diet, but it's like you eat whole foods for 30 days, which means you don't have any sugar, dairy, legumes, or grains. It's actually very limiting. It sounds easy, but it's very limiting. And one of the biggest things that makes people fail is lack of prep. So now I've got this chick that is coming into my home twice a week. She's cooking these meals. It's actually not costing me any more, because I was buying groceries and then throwing them away because I wasn't getting to them. So anyway, all right, that's a long story. Just to say, find the 4 most impactful areas of your life and ask yourself, what are the most important, like if it's your business,
Mhm.
what are the most important things to focus on right now? And then whenever you find yourself outside of that zone of those core four, throw a yellow caution flag and say, do I really need to put energy into this, or is it a distraction?
Yeah. And you know what, you've come across something as brilliant and timely, of course, when it comes to something that's been key to the ages. There's an old story that Earl Nightingale used to tell. I think it was originally told by W. Clement Stone, and it was about a consultant who, he worked with big corporations and gave them advice. And one day he went to the CEO of IBM. He got a meeting with him. And he pitched his consultant service and what he could do for him. And the CEO of IBM, or you know what, come to think of it, I think this was the head of Bethlehem Steel. In fact, if I recall rightly, he was the head of Bethlehem Steel before it became big U.S. Steel and became on the Dow Jones and everything else. And so he met with them, and the CEO said, your proposal's nice. He goes, but here's what my problem is. I can never get stuff done. There's so much stuff that I have going on. I can't get stuff done. If you can go figure out a way for me to get more stuff done every day and to deal with, all the distractions and stuff that's coming at me, I'll pay you just about anything you want within reason. So the consultant went home, put on his thinking cap, came up with this concept and came back to the CEO with it. And he says, here's what you need to do. Every day, before you go to bed at night, write down the top 10 or at least top 4 or 5, like you're doing, of the most important things you need to accomplish that day. And as soon as you come in the next morning, start working on getting rid of those things. Put all the distractions away and go through 1, go through 2, go through 3. You can skip around if you want. Like if sometimes 3 is easier, it's not as important, but you can jam it out really quick in a few minutes. Do that. But focus on accomplishing those core 4 or 5 things every day. And if you'll do that, over time, you should be more successful. So the CEO of, I believe it was Bethlehem Steel, if I recall rightly, took and did that. And they say it was one of the proponents for them becoming a huge corporation that became eventually U.S. Steel. And the CEO eventually wrote this consultant back and he said, what you've given me is one of the most powerful tools I've ever had. I'm accomplishing stuff. Wrote him a check. This is in the 20s or something, or 30s, for like $50,000 or $60,000 for payment. And of course, it seems to have changed in industry if the story is accurate. But you're doing much the similar thing where you're focusing on people on what's most important, and by focusing on them, you can avoid the multitude of distractions we have, not only offline but online.
Yeah, because, I think if you triple down on a few things versus being pregnant with 17 or 20 ideas, you can just accomplish so much more. I've had projects where it's like they're just messed up because there wasn't the right brain power going towards them. And so since we've been doing this year, we've created we've created, like, departments are creating their core 4. My main business that I own, the collection agency, it has its separate core 4. My brand has a core 4. I've got my personal core 4. And it's just like, it's given everyone a clarity. And, clarity is super powerful because now we know anytime our energy is going outside of these 4 things, it's time to dial back and throw up that yellow caution flag. Yep. And it's just been, as far as, it's also made my leadership stronger because I don't have to get in there and micromanage as much because they've got their set variety of things that their energy should be going for. Plus it's actually motivating because when you take off that level or take off one of those levels of overwhelm, you just feel better. And when you can see, so let's say you can see progress being made. So you accomplish one of these core focuses, you can just change that out for the next thing. So you don't have to change them all at once. But I also took this a level deeper to say, take each one of these core focuses and write a 1-page action plan for each and every one of them. The 1-page action plan is something that is the last chapter of my book, which is all about taking action, because I think we have a little bit a lack of taking action these days, but writing a one-page action plan for each one of the cores and then putting it on a timeline. So you take that action plan, you put it on a timeline with tasks and deadlines. And the next thing you know, to me, what we ended up with was a 2-year business plan.
Wow. It's so important to get down the core of things, and the distractions nowadays in our world is so insane. How many Facebook likes did I get on my Instagram post, whatever. I always harken back to, I went through a period with my dogs, which are my children, where they would be before me. They were getting old. They were starting to pass away. They wanted more attention, and I would be petting them and interacting with them, but I wouldn't be there. I'd be gone thinking about, okay, what do I need to do, and what's my next Facebook post, and a million different distractions, if you will. And I just would not be there. And I started to learn that I was being so overwhelmed and bombarded by my ego with all this noise that I was never really present in my life. And it's really helped me recently to get into the books of Eckhart Tolle and learn the presence of now. But I'm reminded, like what you say, and it's been prevalent in my life sometimes whenever I catch the movie City Slickers on with Jack Palance. And he says, you know what your problem is? One thing, this thing. You've got to figure out what the most important things are. And so what you're doing with your 4 points is helping people focus in and tune in to what the most important things are that they can accomplish every day, that they can focus every day, so they can feel more fulfilled and they can feel like they're actually getting stuff done in life. Because I know I get so many distractions. Sometimes I sit at night and go, what the hell? I missed everything today that was important to me. And it was a waste of a day, really, when it came down to it.
Yeah, I know. And, we only have so many days in our life cycle. So to have, so many hours, but we can waste so much of it on social media. I mean, I've got like one of those love-hate relationships with social media, because on one hand, it's amazing, that we can connect ourselves with anything and anyone around the world. And it's a great tool as far as waking up, but it has been manipulated in such a way that it's caused certain addictions, like you say, with the likes and people becoming obsessive about the way that we post. I was just at an event in LA over the weekend, and a lot of time was spent on talking to emerging leaders about being vulnerable in their posting. And I thought, oh my God, is this a thing? Like, do we really? Because it was the event I was at, it was a younger generation event, and this is how they think they're supposed to grow a business. And it was actually quite sad to me to see that this is what they think business is about.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's so hard with what we have with so many distractions and so many our priorities, and we're almost more narcissistic now than ever before with our posting of selfies and how we're consumed with our likes, and I posted that, how many people liked it, and shared it, and how many followers do I have, and everything. And I'm not saying I'm not guilty of any of this, because I am, but in fact, I got the podcast report this morning, and I was like, yeah. So I am guilty of being self-involved, but the world does go by you. I mean, a year ago, as my dog was passing for 14 months of cancer, it wasn't sudden, it wasn't overnight. It was a long, drawn out thing of hospice care. And during that time, the election happened, and I don't respond to being gaslit very well. So I react very poorly to it. And I learned that, fortunately, from that experience. But, my dog was dying, and every day we didn't know if she was going to make it to the next day. And instead of spending every moment and every second that I could with her, I was online raging about politics and everything else. And her life was passing away literally right before me. And we need to start understanding or refocusing, like you say, with 4 points, and focusing on what's important to us, because people go by us, life goes by us. And then we wake up one day, I even still have the same problem with my mom, where, I recently went home for Christmas, and And I've had to constantly tell myself, she's 75. The sands of the hourglass are not lasting forever. She's not immortal. And, I need to try to spend more time with her and interact with her more, because she's, you think of your mom. Yeah, she's immortal. She's my mom. But, importance, like what you say, with points with family, relationships, people in our lives, all that sort of good stuff. We've got to make sure we keep our eye on the ball with what our priorities are and what's most important to us. Because sometimes you wake up and realize some of the most important things in your life went right by you.
It's so true, because, I one of my taglines is that everything you say, everything you do, every choice you make in the thinnest sliced moments of life is either creating a deeper connection or driving a disconnection. And that's true, whether it's creating a connection with another person, an animal, someone that you perhaps want to do business with, but also in things like your career, your finances, your spiritual growth. I mean, I think that for me, the older that I get, the less attached to things I become, and the more I seek out experiences that will overall enrich my life. And, thank goodness that I live in a time and a place and a country that allows me to do that. Because even 200 years ago, Chris, we live like kings and queens we actually live better. Like, you and I live a lifestyle that's better than the kings and queens did 500 years ago. I mean, you and I we can go out to a restaurant and be served and entertained and have the best. I mean, you live in Vegas, so you have, I'm sure, some of the best cuisine available to you. But here, I live in a small town. There's so many locally owned farm to table restaurants here in my small town. I can go out and be served and entertained and have better food than what was available 500 years ago. But
I'm going to start using the staff and wearing a crown when I go to McDonald's from here on out then.
Well, okay, McDonald's does not count because that's not real food.
That's true. That's true.
You can't say that to someone who's doing the whole 30 plan.
Chili's in a big robe and a staff and a crown, and I'm here to be served.
They would probably serve you as long as you gave them a big tip. Chili's, listen to you.
But no, you're right. We do live better, and what's unfortunate is we take much of it for granted. And I mean, I can hire anybody to come do whatever for me. I've got to do some electronic work here in the house to put some of these cool new switches we got from a company in. And yeah, I mean, the other thing is we don't live in French society where we can actually have bread. We don't have to eat cake. So. Although I don't know, I think some of our political forces want us to eat cake these days. So I don't know.
Sugar is bad.
Sugar is definitely bad. Definitely, I'm a witness to that and a living embodiment of that, if you will.
I say sugar is actually, I finally just watched the Fed Up documentary that everyone else probably saw 5 years ago. I just watched it like 2 nights ago, and sugar's terrible. And it's actually a bigger toxin now than cigarettes. It's a bigger issue in our country than cigarettes.
Especially in the way they've modified it scientifically with corn syrup.
Yeah.
Did you read was it the video about how they subsidized corn in America and created the corn syrup epidemic and diabetes?
Right. Yeah, because it doesn't have to be technically labeled as a sugar. And so I think
was it Food Incorporated? Was that the movie? There's a bunch of them.
Well, the one I saw was called Fed Up, and it looked like it had a lot of Katie Couric in it, but it was really well done, and it showcased several children that were morbidly obese, and just like watching their lifestyles, watching their parents struggle through going to the grocery store and not really knowing what's healthy and what's not healthy, because and I didn't know that people were still affected by this or tricked by the marketing of like low fat or all natural. I mean, really, if you look at the ingredients and you can't pronounce the words, Why would you, I've got a thing, chapter 5 in my book is all about cleanse or clog, which is just really, you look at something, it's either going to cleanse you or it's going to clog you. And, that's not, it's a simple way of understanding that everything you're putting in your body is either going to clean you out or it's going to clog you up. It's just we're in control of our own health as much as we don't want to believe that. I'm in an industry that I work a lot in the medical field. And I think that there's been a big debate for a very long time about some sort of universal healthcare program. But I'm going to tell you something, Chris, like the reality is, and this is a big reality, a lot of Americans might want free healthcare, but it would cripple our healthcare system because Americans are so unhealthy and overweight. And of course, I'm not saying every American is unhealthy and overweight, but the percentages are scary and staggering.
And they're growing.
Right. It's growing as fast as podcasts, Chris.
I'm not sure quite as fast, but hopefully it will. But not.
I read some statistics recently about podcasts. It was quite fascinating. But this thing about healthcare, it's like, the one country that universal healthcare is working in, and I think it's Switzerland. I could be wrong about that, Switzerland or Sweden, but the people there have a foundation of health. And so the reason that their universal healthcare plan works is because they have a foundation of health already. And I think that something that's really up and coming that I'm super fascinated with right now is the biohacking industry. So when I was just on a trip out to LA, I met a new friend and had dinner, and he was talking to me about these companies where you can send off a lot of vials of your blood and they measure all these different biomarkers. And so they'll measure things like your inflammation and lots and lots, like 100 different biomarkers, and then give you a report of what you need to do in order to bring that particular biomarker into optimal health. So it'll tell you where you're at now, but then also tell you like, here's where you should be if you want to be optimal. And why wouldn't we want to be optimal? Like, why would we not want to feel as good as we possibly can in this physical body? Because like for my lifestyle, after 20 years of a super like hard driving CEO lifestyle, I was really punishing myself more than I ever even realized. Like the toll I was taking on my physical body was enormous. And so like, I guess now I'm approaching 45, it's time to like really focus and pay attention to that and not like wait for a medical doctor to tell me what to do.
Yeah. I've had a lot of friends that in their 50s, most of my friends are in their 50s and they've had heart attacks and events, and that's the wake up call. And that's certainly what you don't want to get to. I went through my thing where I, took a turn of trying to get healthy, where I quit sugar and I went to a vegan lifestyle for a while, and lost, 70 pounds in 3 months. And that's how much sugar, Mountain Dew, all the pop I was drinking at the time, and the sugar in my food, and discovering that. But on top of that, at the same time, I went through the journey with Abby, where Abby was diagnosed with cancer, and she stopped eating. And she literally started wasting away. We were starting to see her ribs a little bit. I thought it was just old age and arthritis, but turns out she stopped eating. And the way I feed Siberians, I just put the food out there and they graze on it when they want. So I really wasn't monitoring her intake. But in finding out she had cancer and that she'd stopped eating, what we learned, and I'm not saying I'm a professor on this, but from the research I've done and research I've seen on sugar, cancer loves sugar. It feeds on sugar. It loves sugar. And what we found with Abby, we took her in and diagnosed her with anal sac cancer, and she wasn't eating, and the doctor, said she's not eating. This is the sign that she's done. This is, most animals, when they quit eating, they're done. And so he said, why don't you go spend 3 days with her, bring her back, and we're going to call it. And it was devastating, of course, at the time. And I went online and I did some research on anal sac cancer and researched everything I know. And one of the things I came across was the raw food diet, the high fat, low sugar diet that people had used in saving their dogs that had cancer, or at least buying more time. And so the more I researched it, the more I went, well, you know, what do we have to lose? She's got a death sentence. I mean, you know, she already has the sentence. You know, right now we're just going to fight to buy time. So I tried it. I flipped the switch, took her off of kibble. We put her on an all-meat, high-fat diet. And the premise of some of the studies that I've read, I'd have to find the main one. There's one, and it's very old data too, that still exists. But basically they found that fat doesn't really help cancer. What helps cancer is sugar. And by switching her off of high sugar kibble, high sugar treats, and moving her to a high fat diet and eliminating all the sugar from her diet, we brought her back. She started eating again. And what we found, or what my theory is that because I was feeding her stuff that her body knew was feeding the cancer, it was killing her. And once we gave her, and so she stopped eating because she's like, this stuff is killing me. Her body knew it. And once we flipped her to a high fat diet, she started eating again. She started putting on weight. She started coming back from being dead. And we went from 3 days of a life sentence or death sentence to 14 months. And
wow.
And one of the things she stopped doing, what happens, what most people don't realize with animals and people, is cancer doesn't really kill you. It destroys the organs, and the organ failure is what kills you. So one of the things that cancer does is it goes after your kidneys and your liver, because it knows once it takes them out, you can die. And so it will increase the amount of a chemical that is escaping me right now. And they do it by use of manipulating the pituitary gland. And the pituitary gland increases this chemical in your bloodstream, which will kill your liver and kidney if it does it. And so that's why you see people with cancer, animals with cancer, they're constantly drinking. They're very thirsty. It's because their body's trying to soak in all this water so it can help filter out the blood, because it's killing them. And I can't, for the life of me, I can't remember what it is right now off the cuff. But that's why, you know, she was drinking like a fish. I would just watch her drink, and she would just drink endlessly. And turns out that was her body trying to offset the chemicals that the cancer is trying to use to kill her liver and kidney. Now, once we put her on the all-fat diet, took the sugar out of her system, we brought her back, and she became very normal, and she wasn't drinking like a fish anymore. Now, the cancer did grow on the outside of her over time, but there were times where we went through arrest periods where nothing seemed to be growing. We seemed to have a fairly good pattern, and everything was cool as long as we had our pain pills and our infection pills going and everything else. But then, of course, we would go through jumps and stuff. And, you know, the doctors were like, you've got to understand, you're not going to stop this. And if you do stop it and arrest it for a while, it's going to come back. The same thing in humans. But that really impacted me and taught me the power of how much sugar is just a horrible drug and not really that good for us. I mean, a certain amount of glycemic sugar is okay, but, you know, ours has been chemically manufactured and you know, relabbed to a point where it's actually designed to tap into our, you know, the same sort of highs that people get with heroin, crack, and everything else. Those, you know, those atmospheres in our brain that set off, you know, all those things that make us feel really good when we're on them. And sugar is a drug in fact, when it comes down to it.
One of the things that I found really interesting is that on the labels of the food, you know how it'll say all the things and it'll tell you what percentage of like their daily value that is, you know, like your percentage of daily fat, or so on sugar, there's no percentage.
Yeah.
So you don't, it's completely hidden. And it makes me sad, because when you learn the true, you know, and I don't want to come across like a conspiracy theorist, because that's not where I want to put my energy, but it does let me know not to trust in those industries or trust in the government, like they should protect me, but that the true way to empowerment is to empower yourself and learn through whatever medium the thing that you learned, which is that sugar is bad. And if you want to be optimal in your health and ward off as much disease as you can for as long as possible, you're not going to be able to do that if you're feeding yourself sugar. In fact, even if you are a thin person, you can still be healthy on the inside because of sugar. So sometimes it's a hidden thing, because if people actually don't have a weight problem.
And you don't realize how much of it is in our food. I mean, to me, I mean, when I was losing weight, I was losing 2 to 3 pounds a day. Once I cut out all the pop and all the junk food I was eating, the Stouffer's dinners, the pile. I mean, I was just a garbage dump with my body for many decades, and it was a testament to how poison it was. And you mentioned conspiracy, and maybe you're referring to the Illuminati or something, but there is a conspiracy in that these guys design this food nowadays in labs to tap into the highest levels of dopamine and everything that they can fire off in our brains, so that we get
doing the
addicted.
same thing. Yeah, they do the same thing as the Facebook likes do. There's an addiction quality, and I've seen all the studies with the kind of conspiracy. The kind of conspiracy I was referring to is when lobbyists go to the government and make them change the rules so that like pizza is labeled as a vegetable so it can still be served in school, all because they didn't want the contracts canceled through the powerful vendors of the school system. So that's what I'm talking about. I don't know about the Illuminati, other than, it's fun to watch.
But if you watch the movie Food Incorporated, I believe it is, it talks about it's either that movie or one of the other ones like it, but it talks about the manipulation of the Food Administration, the lobbyists, the people who come on that actually used to serve on boards, the fake what is it, the fake DNA food that we have now, Monsanto.
Oh, the GMOs. The
GMO, and how they've bullied, sued, and put natural organic farmers out of business. And they're banned in certain countries because certain countries are smarter than us. But yeah, on one hand, in a perfect world, you do have to say, well, the government should regulate that. But then on the other hand, this is life. You've got to get self-actualized and protect yourself and control your environment, if you will. But yeah, a lot of these food nowadays with sugar and corn syrup is genetically designed to addict us, just like cigarettes and everything else. And we get addicted to this food, and I don't think we realize how poisonous some of it is. I mean, you watch these commercials nowadays, and some of the spins they put on food. Well, it has lots of protein. Oh, I need protein. I should eat that. A bowl of Trix cereal. It's insane. And one of the other journeys I went on when I lost weight was really starting to read nutritional labels and how much they trick you with per serving, sort of things. Like I remember one time in my journey, I was losing weight, and I was like, well, I want to eat more natural live foods. And I'm like, I'll eat salsa because I love salsa. And so one day I consumed like half a bottle of salsa. My friends on Facebook, they're like, Chris, you ever look at the sodium levels? What's in there? I'm like, oh, I'm sure they're high, but it's no big deal. And I got looking at the jar, and it was like, it has incredible sodium levels on a per teaspoon basis. And I'm like, I just ate half a jar. I basically just took like half a Morton's bottle and shoved it in my mouth. And it's sad that we're still being gamified by these companies and nutrition labels. And we need to take responsibility for it. One of the things I talked about is that I realized is that I developed from my parenting. And my parents are good people, but they use food as a reward. So somewhere in my brain, I linked up that food is a reward. So you get the big business deal, you go get a great big red steak, or you get a big giant burger from In-N-Out. I used to go to the store and do all my shopping, and I'd be like, well, I did so good today doing my shopping and accomplishing something. I need a reward. So you get like the cupcake tray or bag of Doritos or something. And I started learning about how my brain had been wired and trained to do the food is a reward, when really it shouldn't be. Food should just be about nutritioning yourself and keeping your system going, and that should really be it. It shouldn't be some sort of reward or something, and to where your brain is enslaved to this dynamic.
It's so true. I feel the same way. I've not rewarded my children with food. I mean, I've made a bazillion other parenting mistakes to screw my kids up in all kinds of fascinating ways, but you know, they're more modern ways, I suppose. There's always in today's world, it's more the battle of the video games.
Yeah. Yeah, the battling of video games, getting them off the internet, all that sort of good stuff.
Right, right.
My brother with my nephew and niece will sometimes game online together in a big party, and it's always fun to kind of hear him negotiate at the end of the night. It's time to get off. Oh my God. So I'll shut off the internet. It's always kind of a big challenge. You know, parents have so much they have to do nowadays that, you know, I mean, between the internet, I mean, that would just freak me out. Just like, you know, what they can find on the internet by just a bad misspelled freaking search thing in Google. Now you can just get about whatever and go, oh my gosh. Even on Twitter, I go on Twitter. I don't know if I'd be able to let my kids on Twitter. If I had them, you go on Twitter and I've seen full blow porn on there, and I'm just like, what? How is this on here? But the things that you can trip over nowadays and the parents have to deal with, it's just mind boggling.
It sure is. Well, that's
on top of diet and sugar.
Well, we've taken this show in a really somber direction today, haven't we?
Yeah, we've just gone on a nice little journey of education curves and everything from sugar to focusing on what's important. And maybe that's one of the 4 things you should do: less sugar in my life.
Well, definitely, I'm focusing on whole foods and just putting good stuff in my body, and so far it's paying off.
Yeah, it definitely makes a difference. The one thing I learned from going through my catharsis of losing weight, and I basically just became vegan for a short time, and I'm still kind of pseudo-vegan. I basically am vegan from a point where I try and stick with live foods, fresh foods, produce, stuff that's not dead, that hasn't been repackaged 50,000 times. Frozen is okay for vegetables, but it's not ideal. The taste quality just isn't there, and I think there is sort of nutrient loss, not wholly, but I think there's an edge taken off. And certainly, you know, we eat a lot for flavor and taste. I mean, that's what these labs do when they addict us, is they're focused on our taste, our tongue. They're not really focused on what it does to our bodies after, but it's geared towards make them love that taste, make it set off the dopamine in their brain and want more of it. And so one of the journeys I went through with becoming vegan for a while in live foods, fresh foods, was learning how to prepare it for taste. You know, even one of the things I learned that I never thought I'd do and I never wanted to do, I hated the very thought of it, was learning to prepare and eat tofu. And what I found was that by using a lot of recipes, the Yummly app was a big proponent, learning to prepare vegan food and fresh live foods in such a way to make them flavorful and make me addicted to their flavor in their natural way, but also set off the same sort of dopamine responses of, wow, this really tastes good. And it's really tofu, but you know, I'm eating for the taste of it. You know, my mom does this funny thing. She's, and I know there's some women that do, she'll eat something because she wants the taste of it, but then she'll chew it, she'll taste it, she'll experience it, and then she'll spit it out. So she can't gain weight from it, but she likes the taste. And that's a lot of times where we're either being manipulated by industry or manipulated by ourselves. We want that great taste, but in the end, sometimes when it passes from our tongue to our throat to our bellies, that's not where it gets good.
Sounds like an eating disorder, Chris. She's 75. She can swallow it.
Yeah, she can. Well, you know, she's my mom, and she's a woman. She's obsessed with her weight and her look and how people perceive her.
At 75, that's still a thing?
That's still a thing. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
God bless her. You know, and I think a lot of people are that way. But you know, it's you know, I mean, at her age too, it's a struggle too, because she understands how much by eating badly can impact her. And I've even noticed with me just hitting 50 this year that what I eat, what I consume impacts me. I've had to quit drinking booze. I mean, I'll still might have a beer every now and then, but hard liquor I've had to move away from, because I can just, like, for 3 days after hard liquor, I can just feel the effects on my body, and it's not fun. And the older I get, the less fun it is. And your body just doesn't deal with some of the poisonous crap you throw into it. And she actually works out every day harder than I work out. She works out for an hour or two. And if she doesn't do it, she has really trouble functioning. I've gone to the gym with her and just been there going like, you're wearing me out just with watching all you. But, you reach a point in your age where you realize that these diet, what you eat really affects the quality of your life and experience that you're going to have. We've all been there with the meat haze. You eat a big steak and just like, and you can't form. But yeah, it's a world where you really have to be self-actualized, I guess, and take control of your world and make it better. And you've brought some great points to the show that we talked about to do that.
Yeah, it was really fun to be on again.
Yeah. So, Mary, give us your plugs again, and everyone can look you up, order your book off Amazon, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I've got one right here. Look at this. I've got Conscious Communications, your step-by-step guide to harnessing the power of your words to change your mind, your choices in your life. You can find this on Amazon or probably anywhere books are sold. And maryshores.com is an easy way to find me. I also have a Facebook group called Fearless Ambition that anyone is welcome to join if you want to interact with me in any way. I'm pretty active in that group every day. Love to see you.
Awesome. Well, it's wonderful to have you on again, Mary. We'd love to have you on again, as always. We have great guests. We have all the best guests on the Chris Voss Show. That's a really bad political impression. We have all the best podcasts. So thanks to my wonderful audience for coming by. Thanks to my wonderful guest, Mary, for coming by. And we certainly appreciate you guys. Be sure and share the show. Refer the show to your friends, neighbors, relatives. Go bang on the doors in your neighborhood and say, I want you to download the Chris Voss Show. Go bang on a Saturday morning, early in the morning, and say, have you heard the gospel of the Chris Voss Show podcast? Give him a Book of Mormon. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. We certainly appreciate you guys. Go to, of course, iTunes, Google Play, youtube.com/Chris Voss. Hit that bell notification button, patreon.com/Chris Voss. And we'll see you guys next time.